when you're transitioning from the lower budget films to these bigger budget films, how involved in those decisions, like the producerial decisions, are you as a director?
I'm trying to be as involved. Joseph Chambers came together really quickly, and Clayne really has helmed the producing aspect of it with that film. So on that level, he handled kind of all of that, and I've just been dealing with the production, the editing, and the post production, and so forth. So I don't have a lot of significant like contribution or kind of authority in that space. My hope is going forward to either have more control or again be in larger budgets, so I know it's taken care of, because that middle area, it's a harder space to kind of exist in.
Yeah. Maybe making those decisions or having to think about that can also impact like how much creativity you're able to put forth as well into those decisions.
Yeah, it's interesting because prior to working with Oscar, I did all the cinematography.
Yeah.
And so I was directing and doing cinematography. Rod was doing sound and directing. And so it was this shared responsibility of the directing, but then focus was on the cinematography and frame. When I gave up that kind of responsibility to Oscar, that was actually really hard for me to like kind of turn it over, because it was like so many things that impact the film come from the cinematography. Even as we talked earlier with Deacons, it's like the camera operates because the movement of it is so critical in like how he wants to tell stories.
Yeah.
And so it took a little while for me to really be comfortable giving up the reins to Oscar. But he's such a great cinematographer. It wasn't a trust factor. It was me learning to like let go of that kind of control.
Yeah.
But as a result of giving up that control, all of a sudden I could focus more on the actual performance aspect of things. And I was like, oh, I'm just looking at what the actors are doing performance-wise, not worrying that they're going to walk out of the frame, or that I need to make sure I'm panning and pulling focus at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, and all of a sudden it opened up this window that hadn't been open before, where I could work with the actors more. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is really liberating. And I think in many ways, if I could step away from the producing side even more, that probably the same thing would occur.
Yeah.
Because I'm still concerned about budgets. I'm still concerned about crew. I'm still concerned about all those elements, which it's not like a wrong thing to be concerned about, but it's a daunting thing to ask, investors for a certain amount of money, then be making sure that they are going to recoup their investment. And not that I wouldn't on another production, but to not even be thinking about it would be very interesting.
Yeah.
Like whether or not the film succeeds or doesn't succeed doesn't matter. It's like the whole focus is just like telling and making the best story. And there's some elements in this new film, Joseph Chambers, that I can see being impeded by that. Like some things that I want to, there's like this this tracking kind of truck shot that like, it could be interesting to like speed it up and do it like 400 times its speed and see what that like kind of does. But you're moving into like a different arena of storytelling, because if you do that, then you have to do certain things in other places, and that would be kind of interesting to explore. And there's some elements of it that I'd like to, but at the heart of it, I know who the investors are, and they're not filmmakers. They're, business people that hope to make their money back. And so some of the decisions I've made like don't go so arty that
curtailed a little bit.
Yeah, it still considers the audience, and maybe I'll never forget that or give that up. But there's some elements that I'm like, oh, it'd be interesting to like experiment and try some of these things.
Yeah.
Because maybe it can open a door to a new way of storytelling.
Yeah. Do you feel like in moving into this bigger budget space, that's one of the ways that the stories is changing? I guess maybe that's my question for you, is what ways are like the actual story and the creative process changed in having a bigger budget?
Yeah, again, the audience begins to be like the consideration. The studios, I mean, one of the things that's important, or at least for me, I read this article with Sean Baker, for example, who I admire his films and love his work. But we met him at the LA Film Festival, Rodrigo and I, and we spent a day just kind of hanging out with him and chatting. And we love all the same filmmakers. And it was like, but he makes these things that, you know, like the Florida Project, that are a little bit more baked in commercial, or they have these elements of them that, and commercial is the wrong word. It's more like they can hit a larger audience is probably the more appropriate word, because he's not making commercial films at all. But I found this article with him where he was talking about Carlos Regatas, who we both love, and these long and silent light. He did these really long durational shots. And Sean in the article was like, I'd love to do those. I'd love to do the type of filmmaking that Carlos Regatas does, but I can't do that. I would not be able to get funding, because I don't live in the same world that Carlos Regatas lives in, which if you dive into him, he was like a lawyer for a very successful lawyer. And it's like, so wherever world he comes from, he has these liberties to like do this stuff. And Sean was acknowledging that aspect and how he's like, I'm making the stories I want to make and the stories I want to tell in the arena that I'm allowed to kind of navigate. And that is something that I've been thinking about over the last, 6-7 months, is like, what is my arena into making larger budget films? And some of that is, at least as I've talked with studios and taken these meetings, is like, think about things that maybe appeal to a larger audience, but can still have your style and aesthetic on it. Yeah. So the script that I'm working on right now, for example, is a robbery film that's baked in a genre we have genres of robbery films, but then has the elements of like moral quandary that I really like, and commentary on this, like, this state of us socially as a society, focused on kind of the middle class, or the lower middle class, to poor live. It's like where I live. How can I tell stories about me? Yeah. If I can bridge those gaps, then I can move into the higher films. But I don't know. Doors have not opened that I can be, Robert Edger and just make, Lighthouse, which I think is amazing. But it's like, whatever arena he lives in, he can make such a wild movie, and he's got the financial support, he's got the actors access, and so forth. And Northman Sounds the same way. It's like a $90 million budget with, amazing actors running. That's like super great. But whatever doors open and whatever, things open for him have allowed that arena. They haven't for me. That's like, the more all the scripts I write, everyone's like, these are such well-written scripts, but like, they're heavy, or they're too, we can't give you money because they probably won't make their money back.